Okay, I think we are live. Excellent. Here we are, gathering for our next conversation on Emanuel Swedenborg's work, New Jerusalem. And this week we take up the topic of heaven and hell, very central to Swedenborg's Revelation. I think his most widely read book, Heaven and Hell. Um, and this week we'll take it up in just the short chapter that he writes about it in this work, New Jerusalem, as we continue this journey of trying to think about what it means to be a part of the new church. And so how this idea of heaven and hell is central to what it means to be a part of the new church. And I'm joined this morning by Robin Ferryman from Urbana. Do you want to say hi, Robin?
Hi, everyone.
There she is. And Reverend Andy Stinson out here in Massachusetts.
Hello, friends.
Yeah. So many places we could dive in. I kind of wanted to start with just the first little paragraph. And I actually wanted to read the translation from Lee Woofenden's The Heavenly City, because it kind of, he does a good job of just really getting you right there. And this is number 230, and just the second half of number 230. Lee writes it like this. He says, when we love what is good and believe what is true, our life becomes heaven. But when we love what is harmful and believe what is false, our life becomes hell. And I wondered if that might be a good place to start. Listen, that really kind of gets to it. And maybe that helps us begin theologically, but also really, I know when I read that, I'm like, yeah, I can feel that experience of heaven and hell in my own life. So I wondered if either of you want to jump in there.
Well, I just wanted just to couple that with actually the last piece of this section where he says, I've written a whole book on this, so I don't really need, we don't really talk, but he goes on this last piece. There is no need to add any more here. But he's saying, but what I take from that is that these are the most important things I want you to know about heaven and hell. Like, this is real. Like, I really like, I read all this a couple of times and I read that and I was like, this is actually like, these are the most important things I want to tell you. And the most important thing I want to tell you first is that when we are in good and truth, we are in love. And when we're not, when we're not, we're in hell. And we're in heaven, and when we're not, we're in hell. Like that to me, like that, there's something very deep about that. There's something very big about that, for all of like this really goes down to this, the really real and the really loving, and how we embrace that and how we embody that. And when we don't, it takes us someplace we don't want to be.
I love that, Andy. And that's a neat way to think about it. I like imagining him. Swedenborg doesn't often distill himself.
Right.
He doesn't often say like, here it all is. He's always like, it's all everywhere. And there's so much to read. So that's interesting to think about this chapter as possibly a distillation of the larger story. Because when you read Heaven and Hell, it's like, it's beautiful and it's very fascinating, angels' houses and what do angels wear and what are the people in hell doing? And it's all very useful, I think, maybe to see that, but it can kind of make it about them,
right?
Versus reminding us that this is all about us and this is all about what is being built in my own heart and my own experience. And he right from the beginning is like, this is what's happening. And when you're in truth and when you're in love, you're in heaven. And when you're caught in falsity and you're caught in harmful desires, you're in hell. And it's just as simple, seemingly simple as that.
Right. And what, goes back to his why of like, why am I right? Why does he write any of this stuff anyway? And goes back to that divine charge of like, so that people can find their way to heaven in this world that's getting increasingly complicated, and that's getting, so that people can find their way to the Lord, so that the new church can actually be born into this world and be a part of the world. Like this Like it really goes right, I mean, that's a really good point of like, for all, like, I look at heaven and hell a lot of times like mining, you get a lot of dirt and then you find a gem, and you get some dirt and then you get a gem. And you can't have the gem without the dirt, but at the same time, like this to me, this little section read as like, a just like a jewelry cabinet, it's like there's diamonds everywhere here in a lot of ways. So
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Robin? What was resonating for you?
Well, I liked the ending as well in what Andy said. It really just breaks it down and simplifies it. I've always thought, that of course Swedenborg is really intellectual, and uh, that there's a lot of people that have missed out because they couldn't go that deep or whatever. And I've always wondered why we make it so difficult for everybody. I mean, it really is just a real simplified way of explaining things, to be love and to love and be kind and useful, and it's just so simple. And and all that other stuff gets, I guess, makes it all murky and confusing for people that are not high thinkers. I was at my mother's or my sister's in Florida for Christmas. My mother had flown into just the three of us, and they were asking me, what about Swedenborg? What is that? And I was trying to make it as simple as I could, but I had brought a book with me I was reading, and I kind of read the back of it, just the back of, and they're like, my sister's like, oh, hell no, wouldn't too hard, too much. And I was like, it really isn't that hard. It just sounds that hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I sometimes think Swedenborg, it's like it's for the people who are so caught in their heads. Like it's almost like it's attractive to those of us who want to kind of, but it's not for the purpose of staying caught in our heads. It's almost like so we can go through this journey in our brains and then come back to heaven is when we love the truth and the good, and hell is when we're caught up in falsity. And it's the jewel of Swedenborg is really simple. And I like the way you point that out, Andy, that it's he's motivated. He wants people to find heaven. He's
Right.
discovered something beautiful and he wants to share it. And God bless him that he shared it in the way that he did. And it's beautiful and it's very attractive to some, but it's kind of off-putting to others. But just like all spiritual truth that comes into the world, it doesn't always speak to everyone. And it has the ability sometimes to distract us if we get kind of too caught up in the minutia, but it also has the ability to bring us back. And it feels like this work in particular, I don't know, feels like one of those works that helps us to come back to what is this actually all about? And it's about this inner choice that we have to make. And I like that I certainly am. I like that most of this chapter is about heaven and what heaven feels like. There's not a ton of belaboring detail about hell.
Right.
I want to get into some of the belaboring detail about hell, but maybe we want to talk a little bit more about heaven before we go there.
Well, I just on that is like, and we'll go to it as we go along, but just, the biggest thing that was struck me is you kind of take my premise of like, this is really the important things. It's like, it's important, there is one. Like, that's kind of what I heard him say. Like, like we don't need to belabor what it is, but it's important that you know that there is one, and that you can in fact run afoul of your own, of goodness, and there's pain in that, and that's problematic, and that I thought was like you say, like there's not a lot in there, and I thought that was an interesting choice, but to make sure that it was still,
Yeah. And then really it's all falsity. What is the two words he uses? Falsity and harm, I feel like he uses the word harmful. False when you love what is harmful and believe what is false. That's how Leaf frames it, which is, I think, when you love what is harmful and believe what is false, you are in hell. You're perpetuating hell. And that includes a lot of things. And we get a lot of details of what that looks like in heaven and hell. But it's almost powerful that he doesn't include any of the details, because we know what the details are.
Right. Yeah.
We have history books full of the details
Right.
of what it means to love what is harmful and to believe what is false. Yeah. And I guess the other point that is sort of obvious, but I think important for him to bring up again is this idea of the inner self and the outer self, and that heaven is present within. He references the passage from Luke about the kingdom of heaven is within everyone. And the sentence on there that I thought was kind of lovely and sort of the people who accept heaven from the Lord are the ones who have heaven within themselves, because heaven is within us. So it's sort of like he repeating again, like it's within you, but it requires sort of this acceptance of its presence within you. I don't know, I wondered
And the embodiment of it too. Like, I mean, I don't, I mean, to your curiosity, like, I think this is in many ways a very intellectual tradition, obviously, but it's also a very incarnational tradition. Is that if you don't live these things out, if you do not embody them, then they are not real. This notion of like, that it's not an earlobes up experience of being alive. It really is a requirement of, trying to love the people in our life the best we can, and actually doing that, and trying to be a neighbor and actually doing that, and that these things are, that whole, Burnham's great illustration in discrete degrees of the different layers of person and the ways in which that goes from the inner person to the outer person, that this case that he makes in there of that it's not it's no matter how many warm chocolatey feelings you have, until it gets into the outer person, it's actually not even really real yet. Like it's all kind of below the surface, below the soil line work of the seed, but until it gets into the actually lived life of the person, that things don't,
yeah.
so that always, so it's a very interesting thing. Like, yeah, with big heady, and we love to think big thoughts and all that sort of stuff, but look at the brain on Brad. But at the same time, we're really like, this is really calling us to a really organic life.
Yeah. And to walk that razor's edge, because at the same time, he's very clear, if it's only in our outer life, it's not real.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
So there really has to be this full integration from inner to outer,
right,
for it to be real. And it's that very fine line, that narrow gate.
What I was thinking about was kind of going back to what you read from Lee Wolfenden about when you love what is harmful and you love what is false. That's how, and I think about the people that can't seem to tell the difference, and how that works. Because even in today's political climate, and it seems like there's some people that just don't get it and they can't see it the way other people see it. Now there's this whole woke fad thing going around, who's woke and who's not woke and stuff like that. And which I feel like they've totally don't even understand what that means because, I have family that are really still hardcore Trumps. And despite the fact that he's going to court and all these charges are being filed against him, all this stuff is being revealed, and they just like have blinders or they don't see, and so that worries me for those people. But is there an excuse or trying to think of the right word, a little waiver of things up in heaven for people who just are just so closed off to that?
Sure. There, I think there is, and I mean, and he doesn't bring it up in this chapter, but he speaks a lot in other places around kind of, we're only really, the only things that really affect our soul are the things we choose out of freedom. So if we're caught in falsity and we're sort of trying to do our best with what the information is that we've received, we sort of can't really do any better, but we can do better as we start to understand more. And I certainly, I feel like one of the things that was on my mind around this is I think we all, in many ways, are indoctrinated to believe things that are false. I don't know that anyone can be born in this world and not be taught some things that are false. And part of the work of growing is to is opening our eyes and starting to question authority and, question the truths we've been giving. And I like to believe every generation is becoming a little bit more conscious.
But with the internet and all the social media, we are bombarded with all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff from all kinds of
Yeah.
places.
Yeah.
And it is hard to discern. And,
Yeah.
some of these people that I know that I feel like aren't seeing things, I know are good people still, despite that,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Which maybe is part of this razor's edge we're start talking about of it can't just be in the external, it has to be in the internal too. And so sometimes if we just spend time kind of in the external, like debating what's true, or kind of sometimes we're just sort of arguing about different falsities. Like we sort of get caught in,
Yeah.
well, this one and this one and this one. And it's sort of referenced in that scripture passage about the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven's over there. It's over there. No, it's within you. That there's
Yeah.
this charge, I think, in this chapter to kind of hold it all lightly. Like to kind of be like, yeah, maybe it's all kind of a little bit not true. And get grounded in where we might be able to experience truth. Like that's my perception, is that
Yeah.
everything is a sort of it's an appearance, everything is and it's skewed by history and power and all kinds of things. So none of it's really the final say, and we can't really argue from that realm, but there's sort of this invitation to come to a deeper inner peace where we sort of hold all of the appearances of truth lightly and kind of accept there's a little bit of falsity probably in all of it.
Yeah. And I really resonate with that. And I hear in this, just this little couple pages of that, that old story of, I wanted to change the world. And so I, tried to go out and, change all the people around me. I tried to change, that was hopeless. I tried to change my family. That was hopeless. I finally decided to change myself. And from there, heaven began to flow into the world. Like, that this is, again, to go back to that, like of all the things he could have included and all the things he didn't include and all the things, and these are the things he did, this drops the package right on our doorstep. Like he really is a very much, I mean, how much did he talk about heavenly community in Heaven and Hell? The whole half the book is heavenly community or hellish community. There's no talk of community here, almost none. It's all about eternal happiness is in this heavenly joy, like it's all incredibly personal. It's all incredibly these are the things that we're going to do in our wheelhouse. Like, and that's where and I think he's saying like, that's where the fight is, that's where, and to your point, Robin, like, I mean, this is a crazy age in terms of the messaging that we're getting. Like there are, the amount of pressure on every one of us in terms of different narratives coming from different places and all this sort of thing. The notion that we're gonna we're gonna really be able to sift through every post we get, every email we get, every and discern the veracity of each one is, I mean, it's chasing the wind. We're really in this place where like, no, this is back to our really our I think the very central again, back to that kingdom of God thing, like the kingdom of God is within you, like to come back to that, to our own heavenly center, to the remains in which are planted on there that we can't break and we can't hurt, and which are finding their way to shine into this world. One of the things that I think struck me in that piece that was so powerfully, and I just keep having this experience. I mean, I talked about it in my live stream earlier, like that I keep having this conversation and it not frustrates me. That's not even the right. It just actually makes me sad about, people talking about, maybe they're older, talking about, well, I hope I make it to heaven. And I'm like, and usually these are like some of the most saintly people you've ever met, like they're like, well, I hope I make it. Yes, you spent 80 years in the church doing nothing but serving everybody around you and loving everybody around you. Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a squeaker, but that notion that's something we can't, that's something we should be, is that issue or afraid of, or that we're not embodying in this life, that we just haven't got it right in this life, or we haven't embodied it in any way possible, that we haven't been touched by heavenly joy in any way possible yet. And so hopefully, I just find that, like, it's just such a sadness to me, because I do feel like actually with that kind of repentance, in the sense of a true sense of like the metanoia, the changing of our lens, with changing our lens, we can actually see it kind of littered all around the earth, like and really in our lives.
Yeah. Maybe that's a good segue into talking about hell. Because I think people, I mean, we're making the point that everything is a bit false. So in some ways of the external world, everything is
Right.
a little bit hell.
Yeah.
And from that perspective, we are kind of, that's one of the theological traditions, that everything of the earthly world is actually hellish. And I think what Swedenborg would say is everything of the earthly world contains heaven and it contains hell. It depends on the way that we interact with it and the way that we experience it.
Yeah. And it's all largely immediate good, even at its best. It's a good thing, but it's not the good thing. It's a good thing on the way to a better thing. That I mean, you look at the biblical story of, his commentaries on, well into the prophets are still, well, this is immediate good, yeah, okay. Or, Jacob was Jacob had, his correspondence of this, and that's kind of like, okay, that's immediate good. Like that's going to get you a little ways down the trail, but it's not love to the Lord. I mean, we don't get love to the Lord in the narrative until the Gospels, like we're busy loving all sorts of things that aren't the Lord, but they're all leading us towards the love to the Lord, and that's so there's that kind of, tension in there of like, yeah, well, it's all crap. Like it's all none of, like it's all a lie. Like, and at the same time, it may be false, but it's not, but it's less false than the last thing. And it's, and it's more good than the last thing, and that which is our path to the, the heavenly life, and to the love, to that true love to the Lord that he's talking about, I think.
All right, maybe this is going to be a weird question, but one of the things I've been thinking about with hell lately, and I feel like this is grounded in Swedenborg, because he articulates that human beings created hell, that this is our
doing,
our journey. So if hell did not exist before human beings kind of evolved, and I sort of imagine this like at the point that we evolved to be able to have this thinking brain that could make stuff up, we started making stuff up and we created this insanity. We created this ability.
By the way, that's the same thing Lewis says. C.S. Lewis says that humanity really starts with the imagination, with our ability to make things up. Like once we can imagine another narrative, and we start, and that's why he spends so much time in fantasy writing and all that sort of stuff, is he actually believes that's the divine thing. And it's funny that you should just say that too. Like that's really, you're in really good company. Yeah.
Well, and on maybe in relation to C.S. Lewis, our ability, our brain's ability to project into the future allows us to imagine beautiful worlds and ugly worlds.
Yeah.
And I wonder, when I think about kind of that before that happened, that there wasn't heaven and hell. Like it was just life. It was just good, that on some level creation is good. And there's this good that sort of actually stands apart from heaven and hell. And we have created, or we have been allowed to create, God has created through us the possibility of this polarity, these two extremes. And I don't know, I feel like there's something very powerful in that, for me to realize, not like that I created hell, but that like people, but that if we have the power within us to create hell, then we have the power within us to uncreate hell, that we have like the power within us to stop creating hell, and I think in this conversation, and especially thinking about kind of the media or falsity or all the, that when we're looking out there for heaven or for hell, we're kind of perverting it. Like we're saying, we're believing that we can sort of hold it within us and say that it's true for all time. but that the truth of who we are and what it is to be living on this planet with all of these other creatures is like so far beyond heaven or hell, that it just is what it is. And then we bring to it these different attitudes. Does that make any sense? Maybe it doesn't quite make sense because
Yeah,
it's something I'm still sort of working out in my own heart. But
I've
what do you
heard or read things too about this idea that before we evolved, when we were Homo sapiens, or whatever, or even before that, as we crawl out of the water, right, and survive on land, and everything is great and wonderful. And then as we continue to evolve, we've developed this our consciousness of self-awareness. All of a sudden, we are become aware that I'm me and you're you when we're separate. And then also the realization that we die, that we have a limited time on this. And then out of that comes this fear, because not knowing what happens after that, or if there's nothingness, then humans started to create God. And probably in essence, the idea of heaven or hell as well later. And this is a real intriguing concept to me, because, how do we really know? We know scientifically that we did crawl out of the water at some time in the evolution of the world. And so at some time we had to have developed, our awareness, our consciousness. And it kind of makes sense that might have happened.
Yeah.
Of course, it changes things, religiously. But yeah, I've often wondered kind of the similar thing. So that if we have that power to create these two concepts of heaven and hell, then we should have the power to, like you said, undo it, or I don't know, recreate it somehow or something.
Yeah. Well, and it feels to me like as we continue to evolve, our awareness and our knowledge has grown. So now we have, at first it was this awareness that we're different and we're at odds with others. And so then we band together with those who are like us, and we kind of create enemies with those who are not like us. And now, I mean, any scientist will tell you we actually are totally intricately connected to each other, and we're not ultimately separate beings. We're shared energy that's manifesting on this planet together. So it's like we actually have the opportunity now with our evolved awareness to see where we got it wrong, to see where we got it wrong earlier on, and to kind of enter back in, which feels very much like the biblical story of the prodigal son leaving home and then coming back. There's this way in which it's playing out, in our human experience. And whether we understand this as kind of God's plan from the beginning, that we would get lost and forget that we're connected to this higher source, forget that we're connected to each other, and then regain that connection. But it feels like it's wherever you want to place the meaning behind it. It's happening. It's happening right now. And I feel like what Swedenborg is articulating, the way he talks about heaven and hell, and grounds us back in our own, that we get to choose, we get to really, I'm struck again and again by how much to be in spiritual freedom is really to own our choices, to realize that we actually we have the freedom to choose whether we will, how we'll approach the moment and what we'll perpetuate. We have some good comments online I want to bring in. Derek Wellington offers, if there is not a heaven, would we continue to aspire to the good? And if we did not, if we did continue to aspire to goodness, would heaven not exist as the aspirational realm?
But yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
Yeah, the whole thing is really, I mean, because it's actually, I mean, this is crashing into, one of the great, radical truth claims Swedenborg makes about kind of the next life, which is that with the incarnation of Christ is the creation of hell. Like if before that, hell doesn't really exist. That isn't to say there aren't evil spirits, there isn't evil stuff, but there is this way in which heaven and hell are intermingled, and that the spiritual life of people prior to the incarnation of Christ is actually very different than the spiritual life of people after the incarnation, because there is this separation in terms of the world. And so that, as much as the evil of the world are created by humanity, hell is actually created by God. by the Lord to in fact keep the good safe. And so that you know, I mean, that's Swedenborg's whole contention with the point of the incarnation is that, you know, humanity, there's just too many evil spirits that have too much access to too many people at any given time, and that the good can't find its way. And so that the incarnation is the victory over hell and the creation of hell, like for the separation, you know, and that's probably, you know, in terms of, you know, long-term view, that might be his most radical truth claim in some ways compared to orthodoxy or other ideas. And, you know, and to me, I think it shows up here in this, you know, in the 239 that you're talking about, like our life cannot be changed after death. And like, you know, if these are the really important things I want you to know, is to know that your life here matters profoundly. Just what, like you were saying, Sage, is like, you know, we have choices to make, and those choices are really important, and they are and that actually heaven is the thing, you know, heaven is the first thing that exists. I mean, this is the whole story of Eden. Heaven is the first thing that exists. You know, that it is that, so heaven has always been in existence, you know, as long as we've been in existence. It's hell that we bring along, you know, that we kind of drag into the picture. You know, and so yeah, I'm just struck by how this is really about, like, he's really pressing a point on, you know, live the heavenly life now. It matters. It's all, you know, I mean, it's almost kind of, it has that little almost old timey Baptist preacher thing. Like, are you going to the hot place? You go to, like, you know, you know, yeah, because it's like, you know, he wants you to know that there's, you know, there is this separation, and there, you know, and the Lord, and he doesn't say it here, but you know, it is, nobody else says this. The Lord created it. You know, the Lord, you know, there's, you know, the Orthodox will say Sheol and all that sort of stuff existed prior to the incarnation. All, you know, there's different ways, different traditions kind of come at that. But this is one of his uniquely different things, is to say, no, there's a separation, and the Lord created that separation with his incarnation. And now it's up to us to step into the, you know, the good, the true, and the beautiful, where we can find it, you know, that. So. And and to your point, Sage, you know, and we see that more and more, you know, the Holy City becomes more and more evident in that as we, you know, as humanity goes along, we see the separation of that, you know. 200 years ago, slavery, not so good, you know, like now, or, you know, slavery, it's okay, you know, now, not so much, you know, and this, we are in this way of kind of understanding what the heavenly life looks like more and more and more, I think, you know. And you're right, like, I mean, it is prodigal in both the ways both the tragedies of the prodigal son story, in terms of the son that stays and never actually gets the fatted calf, even though the fatted calf is right in front of him, and the son that goes out and you know, whoops it up and then comes back broken, and then can then appreciate. I mean, that's almost the Garden of Eden story in some ways, you know, like that's almost it in a way. I mean, I think you're really right to draw that, because it's perhaps one of the really deep, you know, one of the really signature you know, parables.
Yeah, they all feel like the little different ways of articulating the human story. And as we hold this other story of the Holy City descending, you know, that's just another version of that, but on a collective level around coming back to each other, coming back to a space where we're all together, and we have this oneness, and we live from it. I'm kind of struck by I think the other piece of wrestling with hell, and sort of to your point at the beginning, Andy, of like, you're going to make it, you know, heaven is inside. And there's this reality of hell, this reality of falsity, this reality of how it can go badly. And that we are called in this life to wrestle that out, to kind of, I think the invitation to the heaven within is what really saves us. And it's a big part of what Swedenborg is really trying to teach the world, because so much of religious tradition at that point was the priest knows what heaven is, and if you just do the things the priest tells you, then you'll get there. Or heaven was sort of located as this ideal outside of ourselves. And so to bring it back to this inner experience is to really wrestle down, okay, heaven is in here. Okay, it's in within all of us. It's not so hard to get into heaven. I'm gonna find it, and to own the hell that we experience inside, and to kind of wrestle it down and to question it and to wonder about it. Like that feels like very central to the work of the new church
It's at the heart of what you said before when you said, if I have to confront the reality of that hell lives inside me, and until I've been confront that reality, then like I can't dismiss it. I can't then that's when I can become enslaved to it. That's when, to think in any terms of the ways that we think about that, and addiction, all that's, whatever way you want to bring it up, like that's when we become enslaved to it, is when we don't confront the reality of like, I'm the guy who brought the hell. Like I'm this guy right over here. Like, when we come to that place, everything else opens up, the ability to repent, the way ahead, all those things. But that's the first, that really is the place. Yeah.
Right. And to confront it without totally identifying it with it, which I think,
well, exactly. Yeah.
the psychological
Exactly.
tradition, I think a lot we have this concept of ego now. Like we have, I think we have the resources much more now in the world today to own it. We talked about internal family systems, like there's all these things going on in me, and not all of them are up to good, and to be able to sort of see it, look at it, even offer some affection to those bad behaving inner people, inner beings, and then to still kind of choose or look to the good, or whatever this, heavenly influx is that's allowing us all to be here. And I'm sort of continually awed by the attitude that it feels like we as a kind of a global community have, of like thinking we know what's going on and thinking it's all just really bad. Like there's just this like, but if you just sort of step back like a little tiny bit, it's like it's still like raining, like there's still like
right.
daffodils coming up over there in the snow, like that
Right.
maybe life is still kind of functioning okay.
Right.
And we just have this attitude like
exactly.
and I think it's that
right.
attitude that it's exploded, and there's a lot of falsity in our human culture, and it feels like it's the most real thing. But
that's the great lie. I mean, I really think that's the great lie, like it really is. That's the great thing that's trying to pull us all in, is that it's all going to hell. And like, actually it's not. The promise is quite opposite. Like it's actually, that I'm seconds away at any given time from finding a beautiful piece of music, or a beautiful piece of natural beauty, or a beautiful, something like, or something that's just profoundly true that can move my soul. Like, actually it's not that hard. Like, it's actually is really evident, in that. Yeah. And I think you're so right.
Yeah, I was thinking too that you pointed out, Sage, that there is you are sometimes surprised to see that there is goodness still out there. And I do think that we are progressing spiritually. We are spiritual evolution, just those glimpses of it. And I also think that what we focus on too is what we see the most of. Because if you focus on the evil and badness, we're going to see it because it's out there. But if at the same time, when you focus on seeing the goodness, it's out there too, and you'll see a lot of it. And so I do think, I don't know what the statistics are, but I think there is as much goodness going on out there, and people that are becoming more spiritually evolved, as much as there is the evil stuff, And I think a lot of it is what we focus on. Also is what we'll see the most of.
Yeah.
It's just looking in the right place and being aware.
Yeah. Maybe it requires a little looking within, a little silence, a little turning off your smartphone from time to time, and really just like seeing the people in front of you, the people around you, the life around you. I feel like that's been my big wake up call the last couple of years, is like, am I trying to like make something happen because of some idea in my head, or some like dictate, that I feel like I must succeed at, so that I can be safe and I can look good, or am I just letting love flow in my own heart right now, with whatever it is, whatever is at my disposal. And it's I feel like I can make that turn personally and it feels beautiful and I can have wonderful moments. It's harder to do it as an institution.
Yeah.
It's harder to do it as a leader of an institution because there's something that happens when we sort of collectively gather. It's hard to have that kind of simple attitude together. I don't know that it's impossible, and I feel like maybe the more I do it, the more it can happen around me and with other people. But it's a very different way of living, and it's not what we're taught. And sadly, I don't really feel like I haven't seen evidence that it's been like how most people within churches have lived. Not none. I think
I was gonna
probably
say,
it's why
like,
church
yeah,
still is here.
and
is
the fact
there
that there's not none means it's possible
means something.
everywhere.
Yes.
I mean, just because it's hard, or just because we haven't, we're not pulling it off particularly well now,
Yeah.
like, I mean, I might not, swim at Olympic rates, but Michael Phelps can, like there's this way in which that it can be done, and
Yeah.
so my favorite line in this whole thing is it's kind of right in what you're talking about, which is it's kind of a mashup, but he says, this love and faith have heavenly joy within them. And so what's this is, so it's like this love and faith, love for the Lord, have heavenly joy within them. And it's this like, and I just hear so much of what you're saying, like, if I have love to the Lord, that means there's this person in front of me that I have to contend with, that I had to figure out how to love as well, that there's this love, it's just all these things and that within that is heavenly joy. Like within that, it's not, not the right political answer. It's not, being in harmony with everybody that comes to Thanksgiving and not fighting about things. It's in this place of love to the Lord, and that from that there's from that love and faith, there's heavenly joy that flows from this. And I think that's the fact. I think that's like, of all the things that have been suppressed, like that's kind of like, that's really like, that's the kind of the dirty secret here of like, this is actually, that's where the joy flows from. And then from that, we contend with these humans, we contend with this world that's, broken and screwed up, and all that kind of stuff, so it's, that just really, when I was reading this like that, I kept coming back to that because it just struck me of like, again, the Amazon package is not going to the distribution center. It's right on our porch. Like it is right. We're not talking about heavenly communities. We're talking about right in our lap.
Mhm. And the lives that are ours, I think, which
Right.
is another, I keep thinking about how many spiritual communities are typically a church, or there is an ideal that is being lifted up often. And I don't know that it can be any other way. Like that's just sort of how it is when people gather together. And ultimately that ideal always is going to leave somebody out. It's always not going to fit for someone. And it seems to always breed, these are the things we do and these are the things we don't do. And then these firm kind of hold on people. And I just keep wondering, well, so if the holy city is all of us together, all the different people doing all the different, who finding heaven within and then living as they are, like, how do you create community that can hold that kind of a difference? Like, I think the truth is we can't.
Right.
Only God can.
Yeah.
And
the piece that we're just a piece of the grand man, like we're a
Yeah.
piece of the whole, the grand, the great, the divine human. And that, it's one of the things I like about the congregational tradition is that there's just this constant emphasis on this is First Congregational Church of Fall River. And it doesn't look like any congregational church you've ever been in any place. It does it the way it does it. It lives the way it lives. And but it's this little cell in this little place. And it's not, and yeah, there are people who are going to be, it's going to welcome in, and there are people who are it's going to give the stink eye to, and that, that's not necessarily, it can't necessarily be other, what I mean? It really can't, like, as much as we want that, as much as we want, like, oh, like everybody gets the big warm hug. It's like, well, but but even heaven isn't built that way, like
Yeah.
he's, he talked, all of his conversations about heavenly community is that, once people find their heavenly community, they don't wander around. I mean, in
Yeah.
that, he talks so often about how extraordinary it is that
Mhm.
Swedenborg goes from heavenly community to heavenly community because they're not
Mhm.
used to seeing strangers.
Mhm.
They're not used to seeing people from outside their own heavenly community.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that that topic is ironic that there are those individual communities and they don't seem to stray, and yet we're all connected. Uh, and there's a stress on that point that we're all, the same, we're all connected under God and stuff like that. Yet there's all these separations.
Mhm.
And I find that, I don't know, weird.
Mhm.
Maybe a little bit uncomfortable. I like the idea that we can still communicate and maybe kind of cross over, maybe albeit briefly or whatever, just to see our friends,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Well, he uses the image of the body and the cells of the body, which I think works well. And the truth is, the cells of the body do communicate. We have the nervous system moves all around. So, I mean, I sometimes I think maybe I just want to be a blood cell, or like I'm just not
Yeah,
willing to settle in any
right.
particular. So
That
that's
would
why I'm
be
always
me.
interested in how does everybody fit. But
Yeah.
but I think, yeah, there will be some that will move around, and then there'll be some that are just really settled. The trick to me is like, how can we be really different? Be like, this is where I always want to be, and I always want to be in this little town, and I always want to just worship in this way, and I always want to read these books. And I honor you in the next town. How can we just
Right.
do that
Right.
without making everybody around us our enemy? Like
Right.
that's
Yeah,
the
because that's truly
it's
right.
not that we have to all be in constant conversation and reading the same
Right.
books and understanding all the same things. We just need to figure out how to not be enemies with the people who are different from us. Yeah. Anyway, we have actually had quite a few comments come in online. Litchfield's talking about temptation, how temptation is real, and so is our attraction to the things that are not godly. Choice ensues. Shall we seek out the thrill of wrong, or will we find the real joy of doing the right and the good? As the choice is made and acted upon, the moment of encountering heaven and hell within us resolved for the moment. Yeah. And maybe temptation is actually a piece of this prodigal son dance that we talk about of going away and coming back, that temptation is necessary. I'll never forget being at Almont one summer, and I think it was Dean, one of our elders. Someone was asking, what is virtue? And she said, a lack of temptation, which just really sat with me in a deep way. That actually temptation is really necessary for the journey, and not that we have to give in to every single one, but wrestling with it, and when we do give into it, it's not an end, but it's actually another opportunity to come back, and every time we come back, we come back different and changed.
And it's the path through which the inner life becomes into the outer life. Like that's it's through temptations. It's through, boy, the outer life really wants to eat the 18th brownie. And the inner life says, well, maybe eating the 18th brownie is in fact going to get, it's going to give me the diabetes, like this constant kind of conversation between the outer life and inner life. And like that is, I mean, that's how the heavenly life becomes incarnate. And it's through that mechanism. Like that's it,
Yeah.
and as as like, but I think, where he says here, you see what shows in our outer life, in 235, when we arrive in the other life, which happens immediately after death, others can see whether heaven is within us, though this is not visible while we are living in this world. You see, what shows in this world is our outer self, not our inner self. And while the other life, our inner self appears because when we are living as spirits, and that just that distinction of like, we're that we've got to, it's the contending with this outer life, and that we are, and I love that definition of virtue, because it's like that really does kind of give to that, like, the outer life has finally stopped its struggle. Like we're no longer kind of wrestling with the outer life. We really are at this point of of integration with the
Mhm.
fullness of our being, and that's what heaven looked like. That's the life after, that's the next life.
Mhm. Yeah. And we can experience that heavenly life here
Mhm.
anytime. And all of this falsity in the media and all of that doesn't have to be fixed for us to experience it.
Yeah.
I think that to me is, I really have to hold on to that deeply. And I struggle with it, especially raising children in this world with all of everything that's at their disposal. There's a mama bear in me that wants to just fix it all, move them to the woods, put them in a little house, keep them protected. It'll never it's not what I'm going to do. And I don't know that it would necessarily serve them, but it takes every ounce of my will to have faith that they have an inner life, that the kingdom of heaven is within them as well, and that they can navigate this, and find and that maybe, and sometimes in my happier days, I'm like, wow, they're going to figure it out sooner than me because it's crazier than it was for me. And and how do we support each other in this? Like, this is the $1 million question, how do we create community and church and ritual and practice that fosters this return, because it's a return to a life that actually then I
Yes.
really believe is meant to be with us all the time,
Right.
not just, it's not about moving off to the mountain or the cave, it's about living in this world as it is and and resting in our heart, resting in what is true, and resting in this love that is our essence, that isn't defined and formalized and can't really be grabbed even, but has to kind of flow out of us in every moment. What do we do? What do we do, Robin? Can you guys solve this for me in the next 10 minutes?
I grapple with this all the time myself. Um,
Yeah,
well, it starts with the young people, I think, number one,
yeah,
teaching them, being the example for them,
yeah,
as best you can. Um,
Yeah.
I think because, these days there's not a lot of people going to church and they're not teaching it in the schools. So somebody has to teach them. You don't want them to learn, grow up to media, social media, which is what happens, is happening. And I personally think, although I don't have kids, I think that that's a lot of the damage that's being done to the kids today, and lack of parental guidance. And then social media, the kids are out there shooting each other up. And just this morning I watched a horrible video about some kids videotape a girl getting beat up, and it went viral, and she killed herself as a result. And it's terrible. And so yeah, I wish I had the answers to that. I think it's a good thing I don't have kids, because I would be like you. I would be worried all the time.
Yeah. All right, Andy, you're up.
Yeah, that was a downer.
5
So you need
minutes.
to bring us back up.
What's your solution?
Well, I actually think I would bring this back to particularly this little section, just to back to what, like where I think your whole movement to this conversation started was, how do we be the church in this?
Yeah.
And I think what we do is this. I mean, what we do is we gather and we move through the world together, and we care for one another, and we say, oh, it looks like you're having a bad day. How is that? And we hold each other, accountable in the journey of, like, gosh, I'm worried about you about this. We seek to do kindness where we can do it, where we live a life of this little community, that wherever we're gathered with whomever we're gathered, and we insist on the kindness of each other. And quite honestly, I think if you look at the movement of the world and the movement of the great things that have, toppled the tyrants of the world, that's been it. I mean, I think about Lincoln meeting Harriet Beecher Stowe, who was a good little Congregationalist girl that went to school in Brunswick, Maine, and wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin. And he's, and Lincoln's introduction to her, he said, oh, so you're the little woman who started this war. This notion of, like, that her witness of slavery is bad and slavery is wrong went on to actually work towards the abolition of slavery, and that happened in First Congregational Church in First Parish, First Parish UU now in Brunswick. Like that was born in a little congregation. You can tell that story again and again. Garrison and Presbyterian Church, wherever. Like historically, that's how it happened. Is us little communities proclaiming the word of God to each other through, exactly what Lee wrote at the beginning, like when we are, in good and truth, we are headed towards heaven, and that this little heavenly community gives birth to things in this world. We have no idea the power of what they're going to be. And that it's not about the, putting into the right bill into the Senate. And it's not about, it really is about this radical, trying to live the radical life that I think he so profoundly lays out in these couple pages. That's what blows me away. It's like, you got 10, 12, 15 paragraphs here that he just like, yeah, do that, like do that, and really you make that space for the holy city, you make that space for heaven, and the rest will find it's like, I'll do the rest. Lord's like, I'll do the rest. Like, I'll raise up the prophets that the world needs from those communities. I'll do the things that we need to do. I'm just becoming more and more and more just that kind of radical localist idea of all we can do is try to be, be the church, right? Be the church now.
Yeah. Totally. Well, and I think we have good examples of that actually the humans who have done the big things often will say it was just what I had to, it was just what was in front of me. It wasn't that they were going off to seek glory and fame. It was
right.
They were meeting the moment of that they were given. And we have to do the same in whatever moments we're given and whatever moments my children are given. And I think that, right. And my own work of trusting in this moment, I think it's easy to say there was an easier moment and that this one is really, this one's just beyond God's help. And that I know whenever I'm there, I'm being tempted into hell with my hopes for heaven are shifting, are throwing me into hell because I can't see the goodness that's actually present in the moment that I'm in, because it's not as I would wish.
Right.
And I feel like he's articulating well how that's not going to work, Sage. So try a different approach.
That's beautiful.
I have a friend that he cheers me up when I'm down and worried about things. And he talks about this concept that he saw on Seinfeld, of all things, the weird third thing. So you have plans or expectations of anything, and they don't always pan out that way. But if you have enough trust and faith, there's going to be this weird third thing that happens from outer space, or God's going to pull it down that you never even thought of, and it's going to happen. And so what you just shared makes me think of that weird third thing. You have this idea of heaven and worried about getting there or things changing, and just don't let go of your expectations. And you never know, there might be that weird third thing that shows up and it solves it all. You just don't know. And I've had that experience in my life, to just open up to all possibilities, not just what I can see or think of. Yeah. And there is a weird third thing out there.
There's totally a weird third thing. We could call that the Holy Spirit. Any tension, and all we can see is this view and this view, and it's a creative tension that's waiting for that third thing to come in. I totally agree with you, Robin, and I like that I like the phrasing you have, a weird third thing. We got to make space for it, and I think the only way that we can live in this freeze of thinking the world is all crap and it's all clear and this is where all the dividing lines are and it's always going to be this way is to just be caught in thinking that we do know, and when we don't, we never have, and we perpetuate hell when we get caught in thinking that, when God could be making the possibility of heaven, and is, right in the midst of our current circumstances. Wow. Well, thank you for your time, guys. This has been really good.
Thank you.
A lot more good conversations in our chat. I'm sorry I wasn't able to read all of it. But thank you all online for joining us. Good stuff. And we'll be back next week talk about the church,
Whoop, whoop.
which we've of course been talking about the whole time, but we'll get into that more specifically next week. So thank you, Andy, and thank you, Robin, so much.
Thank you.
You know.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye. all.
Enjoy your day.